Today on the Servant Leadership Podcast, we're joined by Dave Ferguson, someone who has spent his life shifting from being the hero of the story to becoming a hero maker. He's helped launch a movement that has planted thousands of churches around the world, led one of the most influential churches in the country, and written books that have shaped how leaders think about growth and multiplication. What stands out most is his commitment to investing in others, not just building his own platform, but helping others build theirs. In this conversation, we unpack what it means to become a hero maker, wherever you're called to lead. It's not just inspiring, it's deeply practical, and it might just reframe the way you think about leadership.
Before we jump into today's episode, I want to thank Thrivent for partnering with us on the Servant Leadership Podcast. Thrivent is a holistic Fortune 500 financial services organization that provides advice, investments, insurance, banking, and generosity programs to help people make the most of all they've been given. Each day, Thrivent helps more than 2 million clients build their financial futures and enjoy lives full of meaning and gratitude. Thrivent is also growing and looking for talent with a heart for service. Join a team dedicated to financial excellence and service that offers competitive compensation, flexible work options, comprehensive benefits, and opportunities for professional growth. Learn more about Thrivent's financial services and career opportunities today at thrivent.com. Dave, thank you for joining the Servant Leadership Podcast.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me, Chris.
I am so excited to have you because I've been wanting you on the podcast, frankly, for a long time. You have had an amazing journey, and I've gotten to hear some of it from your brother on this podcast.
All lies.
All lies. and just around hanging out with him. But tell me the journey of how you got into what you're doing today.
Which part of it?
All of it.
All of it? Oh, man.
Start with the church, how community started, just to get started with, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. I think for me, my kind of version of the story, and there's multiples, there were like 5 of us that were a part of the original staff team, but my version of kind of the story and my experience, when I was a freshman in college, I remember I was really wrestling with this question of what are you going to trade your life for? Which is, it's kind of a big question for a 19-year-old, but I mean, I really was. I was kind of like, and I just had this kind of aha, and I don't remember exactly where it came from, that whether it's like, not to be overly dramatic, but as a martyr all one day at a time, or over the course of 85 years, or however long God gives you, what do you want to trade your life for? And I think for me, I began to process that. And as I began to process, I thought, man, if I could trade my life for anything, and the way we word it now is I want to help as many people as I can find their way back to God. And what underlies that, and I'll be brief on this, is because when people find their way back to God, I mean, that's what leads to human flourishing. I mean, there's a lot of data that comes from Harvard and the Flourishing Project that says there's a strong correlation and a direct correlation between faith and even being a part of a faith community that leads to human flourishing. And so if I could be a part of doing that, that would probably be the key leverage point. So then I began to go like, okay, what's the best way to help the most people find their way back to God? And I was like, well, I guess maybe through a church, and I kind of was pushing back on that a little bit because my dad was a pastor, and while he's a great guy and it was a positive experience growing up, I did kind of resent that a lot of the people growing up thought I'd be a pastor because he was a pastor. So I didn't, that part of it. But then I think I'm just kind of wired more like an entrepreneur. And so I began to go like, well, if I started a church, if a church is the best way to help people find their way back to God, what if I started a church that started a church that was constantly reproducing and scaled it? Then you could help lots of people find their way back to God. And so for me, that was really the beginning of going like, okay, I guess I want to plant a church. And with the dream that maybe God would use it someday to catalyze a movement. Wow.
Well, and that's kind of what happened, right? You planted a church, it grew, it's an extremely large church or a mega church in Chicagoland. And then at some point, I would think a lot of people in your shoes have accomplished the dream and are just like set for life, right? You're running a mega church and people love it. But you stepped out of the church. So what was happening there that made you step out and made you think through what could be next after that?
Well, there's probably a couple baby steps before that, because along the way, two different things happened. One of them was that my youth pastor came to me and said, hey, I want to do what you did. And I was like, what's that? And he said, I want to plant a church. And so now it was kind of like, okay, are you going to put your money where your mouth is? You said this is what you wanted to do. And part of it, truthfully, is I liked having him on my staff team. I actually hired him because I wanted to be the youth pastor for my kids. And so it was kind of a little bit of an oh crap kind of moment.
Yeah.
And to kind of put him off, we sent him, he wanted to do it in Denver. So we sent him out to Colorado, him and his friends. Long story short, he came back with a big smile on his face. And I was like, what's up? And he's like, it went really good this trip. And I was thinking maybe it'd wear off. But he came back and he'd raised enough money just in that like week and a half being gone, connecting with people to actually, with some help from us, then plant this church. Wow. So I got up in front of everybody at our church and I said, listen, they're going to go out there. You know these people, you love these people, and plant this church in Denver. If God's sending them, he's probably sending some of you too. And we had 35 people from Chicago that moved from Chicago, sold their homes, transferred schools, got new jobs, left Chicagoland, moved out to the Denver area to plant that first church. And then after that, we just continually kept, the next one was in Southern California. People moved. After that was outside of Detroit. People moved. Then it was Boston, then it was New York. And anyway, that just kind of really, and think about, maybe for your listeners, we weren't just planting churches. We were planting churches like ours who were going like, oh, we want to plant other churches. So like all of them had kind of this really movement kind of potential within them. And over the next, probably 18 years or so, we ended up being in 69 countries and planting over 25,000 churches. Wow. And again, I want to be careful. I should say we helped plant, because like the church in Chicago didn't plant it, but we might have planted the church in Kansas City that planted this other church that then planted, you know what I mean? So we were a part of that whole family tree that planted all those churches. So that was one part. And we actually gave that a name. Eventually we called it New Thing. Comes from Isaiah 43. Behold, I'm doing this new thing. And because we were constantly doing new things. And then the other thing that happened almost the exact same time was there was a small church planting conference that would meet every year. A couple hundred people would show up. A buddy of mine out in D.C. had just volunteered, because that's the way it works. Someone would volunteer to be the president. You didn't really want to do it, but you'd take a turn. You know how those orgs work. And so he just took his turn and said, okay, I'm going to lead it this next year. He calls me and says, hey, I'm going to lead this. I'll run the operations. What if you are the upfront guy? And I was like, okay, let's do it. And we kind of took that, and it went from just a couple hundred people. The next year had over 700. Then the year after that, well over 1,000, and eventually grew to this. We meet annually now in Orlando with over 5,500 people, and it's not just a conference. Actually, an organization has 4 different verticals underneath it called Exponential. So, to your question, sorry.
That's awesome.
We started the church. We started this church planting organization called New Thing, and then we also helped start this organization that's really primarily is known for its conferences called Exponential. And those things, all 3 of them just continued by God's kindness, extraordinarily kind. It just kept growing. And really, it was only just this past April that we actually merged New Thing and Exponential. So now New Thing is going to be a part of Exponential. And then I also apprenticed a new lead pastor at Community. And that just happened in May of 2025. Handed the baton off to him, where now I'm founding pastor. So really, for the first time in 20 years, I have a real clear, singular focus as the CEO of Exponential.
Wow. That's an amazing journey. Just unbelievable.
I mean, I feel super, super grateful to God. I feel, I don't know how else to say it.
As you think through that youth group leader that you had, and even this new pastor that's coming in and taking over for you, we talk a lot about servant leadership on this podcast, and just leadership in general. A lot of church transitions and church plans don't go well. And I know a lot do as well. How do you look for leadership and servant leadership in the people that you're surrounding yourself with?
Chris, I think I understand exactly what you're saying. The term that we like to use, and we use it a lot, is called hero making.
Yeah.
We want to actually be hero makers, and we want other people that are in the task of hero making. Where, and I guess because we're kind of getting to know each other. Are you married?
Yeah.
Do you have kids?
Yep.
Okay.
2 kids.
How old are your kids?
7 and 5.
7 and 5. Boy, girl?
Both boys.
Both boys. Okay. My hunch is, you wouldn't be leading this company, well, kind of 2 companies, and doing a podcast and a side hustle if you weren't a little bit driven.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you like a graph, probably like me, that's up and to the right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. 100%.
You want to be successful. But my also hunch about you is, as much as you want to be successful, you would love for your kids to be even more successful.
Yeah, 100%.
And like for me, my kids are older than yours, and I have 3. I have a daughter and then 2 sons, and they've all done very well in different things. I'm thinking of one day in particular. My youngest son was a D3 All-American in the steeplechase. And he was a 2-time All-American. But the first time he won, like, our whole family was there. And he had this amazing race where he came from behind at the end to actually become an All-American. It was so cool. And, my one son's hugging my other son, my daughter, everybody's celebrating, right? And stuff. It's funny. I look at that. I think that was one of the best days of my life.
Wow.
And I wasn't the one who was successful. It was them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so there's such, until you really lean into it, some people may not understand this, but there is such joy, such fulfillment when you really begin to engage yourself in this idea of being a hero maker. So like, we did everything we could to make that church plant, out in Denver successful. We gave them we made a significant financial contribution. I got up there, like I said, and I challenged people to move, and they did, to go out there. And I have no regrets about that. And the same thing with Ted Canaris, who's the lead pastor Apprentice, the new lead pastor at Community. Actually, we just did a podcast, and we kind of referenced this way. I'm going like, and he's probably too old to be my kid, but in some ways I feel that way about him.
Yeah.
That I'm going, you know what? I want to be successful. I like to win, but I really want him to be successful, and I will do everything I can to make him successful. And I think this is also true in servant leadership. In the strangest way, you actually multiply your influence by helping other people become successful. And some people think, well, no, I need to focus on my thing instead of their thing. But my experience has been as best you can, as you help other people be successful, there's a reciprocity about that, like a boomerang effect. It comes back to you, and maybe this is the way God's economy works, and it makes you successful. And I don't think this is just a church thing. This is a business thing.
Yeah, 100%. How do you teach that to people, though? Because I don't think that comes natural. Naturally, it's what's in it for me? What can I do for me? Let's make me successful. But across the table, whoever's there, it's not necessarily how do I make them successful in a lot of cases. How do you teach that?
Well, I wrote a book called Hero Maker, and we actually call it 5 practices for leaders that want to multiply leaders. And I can highlight some of those real quick. I think one of the things, because you're right, I think it's easy for us to get really preoccupied with our own thing. So I kind of start with your own thing. And so if I was kind of coaching you up on this, Chris, I'd say, okay, what's the dream?
So many dreams.
Okay. and
follow Jesus well.
Follow Jesus well. But if you're talking about like Project World Impact, what's the dream? I would probably challenge you to go like, okay, I want you to take that dream, make it simple enough you put it on the back of a napkin. But then what I want you to do is I want you to multiply that dream by, and I would pick a big number, 10,000. I actually had a leader early on which pushed me in this direction, say, hey, take your dream, multiply it by 1,000,000. And at that point in time, my dream was I wanted to have a church of 1,000 people, which is such a stupid dream. But it was kind of like, and I kind of strategized, maybe I could communicate well enough to attract 1,000 people, or maybe I could, organize 100 small groups, of 10 each that get to 1,000. And then, so I was thinking 1,000 people, that would be, successful. And then he said, I want you to multiply that by 1,000,000. And so 1,000 times 1,000,000 is 1 billion.
Yeah.
And then he said, now I want you to figure out how do you do that? And it was it just kind of was like mind blowing. It really did. I mean, like I felt like the cavity of my skull began to expand. And what happened is I began to realize, you know what? Now 1,000, maybe I could do it, but 1 billion, I would have to, and I'll talk in church kind of parlance, church speak here, because that's the lane I was in. I would have to work with a lot of other churches to do something like that. I would have to probably work with a lot of different denominations than my own. I couldn't do this. I would have to, find not just dozens, but thousands of other church leaders who had similar dreams, or give them that kind of dream of multiplication over and over and over again to get to 1 billion. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so one of the things I tell people when in the hero making process, the good place to start is you need to have a dream so big that makes you dependent on God. And what you need, Chris, is you need to have a dream that's so big you can't pull it off by yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because if you can't pull it off by yourself, then all of a sudden, you kind of enter the room just looking around at people going like, okay, who here can I invest in to make this big dream happen? And that's the first of five practices. I could share another story if you want. I got all kinds of stuff on this.
It's such a good thought. And I remember we talked with Liz Wiseman about multipliers on the podcast at one point, and in reading a lot of your stuff too, this concept of multiplication keeps coming up, right? And I think so often people are so narrow-minded that, or just maybe not opportunistic enough. It's not narrow-minded, but it's not looking for the opportunities, looking around the table to think through, how could we multiply what we're doing? I laugh because our vision here at PWI is to impact hundreds of millions of people.
Yeah.
So now I'm thinking times that by 1 million. Or by 1,000, whatever.
Well, and maybe you already have a big dream, because if you do, you're already at a place where you're going like, okay, this is not just going to happen to Chris Lessner.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of people that I got to invest my life in, and it may not even happen until after I'm gone.
Right. Yeah.
But I think in doing so, it kind of forces you into this role of, I would say, not trying to be the hero, but of making heroes of others.
Yeah.
Which I think is very, very closely, or maybe almost synonymous with servant leadership.
Well, and now this multiplication concept with what you're doing with Exponential has become unbelievable, working with all these pastors with the different verticals under Exponential. How do you see this multiplying now that you're going to be spending more time in it? And like, what is that vision? What's it look like?
Yeah. Part of our vision, are you familiar with the innovation curve?
Yeah.
Okay, so the innovation curve, for your listeners who maybe not, just go ahead and Google it real quick. A guy named Everett Rogers first introduced it, and Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell kind of popularized it. But on the innovation curve, it kind of shows how change actually happens. And the way change happens is you usually have about 2.5% that are innovators, and then you have about 13.5% that are the early adopters. So about 16%. And if you want to see change actually happen, you really need to go after those 16%. Now, and I know I'm talking to a marketing guy, so you can speak to this better than me, but a lot of us end up kind of going right in the middle of the bell curve, because that's the easiest sell. But if you want to see change, you need to get that first 16%. So at Exponential, our vision is we want to see 16% of all churches in the United States become reproducing churches. Because if we can get 16% of the 360,000 churches in the United States, that's 60,000 churches become reproducing. It does two things. One, back to my original, when I was a freshman in college, it helps more people find their way back to God, which I think is the key leverage point for change. And I think there's also strong evidence that it also leads to human flourishing, which is, I think, what our country really needs. So we're in the process now of kind of rolling that whole thing out and going like, and actually we do research on that. It first hit us about 10 years ago as we began to kind of tiptoe into this. And what we discovered is that about 4% of all churches in the United States are what we call reproducing, this multiplier, this hero-making kind of mindset. In the last 10 years, we've been able to see the needle move from 4 to 5 to 6 to now 7%. And part of our dream is we'd love to see that actually go from 7 to 16 in the next 10 years.
Wow. In terms of the offerings, how do you come up with what the offerings are now with Exponential when you're impacting some of the decisions you make are impacting not just thousands of pastors, but hundreds of thousands of millions of people that are going to be ending up in these churches? How do you process all of that?
Well, I think we have more of a disposition, to steal a line from, Home Depot, I think it was, that you can do it and we can help.
Yeah.
We don't have any illusions that Exponential is going to do this 16%. Mm-hmm. It's churches that come alongside, that we're able to come alongside. They look, and I'll reference the Bible, and they see Acts 1:8, and it says, hey, here's the strategy. Last thing Jesus says before he leaves planet Earth. He says, we're going to start in Jerusalem, then we're going to go to Judea, then Samaria, the ends of the earth. And so one of maybe the very last thing that Jesus said was like, hey guys, don't forget, what I'm talking about here is a movement, okay, that helps people find their way back to God and leads to human flourishing. That's what my kingdom's all about. That's what we're going to do. And so we don't actually do the stuff. We do everything we can, again, hero making, to make those churches that want to do this successful. Now, at our conference, we're probably the largest church planting conference in the world. I mean, we're constantly vision casting. We're constantly telling stories, but we can't make them want to. But once they want to, all right, we will do everything we can to make you successful.
Wow. In this process, there's been tons of learnings, and your goal is to get it out to as many people as possible, right? And you've written a lot of books and been involved in a lot of books. What's that process been like, and how did you get into writing?
Oh, into writing? Well, one of the people that was a hero maker for me was a guy named Bob Buford. I don't know if that rings a bell or not.
Halftime?
Okay. Yeah. So I was actually on the board of Halftime and Leadership Network for a while. And here's a practice for if you want to be a hero maker, which Bob did. Bob would have like a 3x5 card or a wallet card. He'd either keep in his front pocket or maybe back in his wallet. And it would have like 10 or 12 names on it. And those are the people that he was intentionally investing in, both relationally and financially. So again, it wasn't about him being the hero. And even his Halftime, if you read his book Halftime, which is worth the read, probably sold more than 500,000 copies. It was when his only son died that he said, I need to make this move from success to significance. And really it's from being the hero to being a hero maker is what happened. And so Bob was one of those guys for me. I'll throw one more thing at you because there's so much about his legacy that's, I think, really important. He had this saying, and if you resonate with the idea of being a servant leader, or you resonate with the idea of being a hero-making kind of leader, he used to always say this: my fruit grows on other people's trees. And I mean, that stuck with me. My fruit grows on other people's trees. I love that. And so as community started growing and we started planting other churches, it was actually his organization and some of the people in his organization, Leadership Network, that came to myself and my brother John and Eric Bramlett and asked us to write our first book. And they kind of co-branded it with Zondervan. And it was that invitation that really that got us into it. And then after that, I mean, several have followed after that. They did pretty well. Wow.
That thought of, and it just hit me as you're talking about, obviously, success to significance. And I've heard that a lot after being involved with Halftime stuff. And just, I'm a little younger than I think their target demographic, but at the same time, I love the thoughts. That concept of hero to hero maker really applies to everybody.
Absolutely.
And that is a chosen decision. How do you decide when to become a hero maker? Because it doesn't seem like there's any time too soon to do that. It's like yesterday is the best time.
No, I mean, in some ways too, I mean, to use maybe an obvious, maybe not so obvious example, I think Jesus. Okay. He catalyzed a global movement now of more, how many billions of people that call themselves Christians. So how did he do this? Well, you go back to, there's a book in the Bible called John, the fourth gospel. It's kind of a biography about him. John chapter 14, verse 12. And he says this crazy thing to his closest disciples. And remember, he's only got 12. There's 12 of them. And he says this, he said, the things you've seen me do, you're going to do even greater things than these. And I mean, don't forget, Jesus did some pretty significant things, but he was like basically saying, no, listen, it's my job. I'm going to make sure that you're going to do even greater things. You're going to take this good news to more places than I ever will. You're going to be the ones that are going to write the best-selling book, the Bible, not me. He on and on. You're going to be the ones that are going to catalyze this movement that, given enough time in the next 2,000 years, it is going to go from Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria to the ends of the earth. And basically he spent 3 years being a hero maker and then telling them out loud, no, yeah, there's great things happen, but when my spirit comes inside you, you're going to do even greater things. And that's the mindset of a hero maker. And I think anybody who decides to follow Jesus, that's what you take that on as well. And I think that can be something. It could be in your home as a parent. Essentially that's kind of what you do. And when parenting goes bad, it's when you're not, right?
Yeah.
I think when you have when you start your business, it's a brilliant way to lead your business. Because anybody, and you can probably testify to this, anybody who's been successful in business knows, like, yeah, the customer's important, but probably even more important is my staff. Because if I take care of my staff will take care of the customer. And again, it's hero making, and you want to do everything you can. And some of them on your staff too, you know what? They got a business inside them. And when they come to you and say, you know what, man, and they're a little scared, I think I want to go start my own thing. You do it appropriately, but you go like, yeah. And you let me know. You let me know how I can help you. And I guarantee it'll come back to you.
Yeah. I love where you're going with this. And I can immediately, so many things are coming to mind where I've actually seen this happen, both in my life and others. And I think the people that I've been most attracted to hang out with are hero makers. When I think about it in that language, what do you think the first steps are to becoming a hero maker? Because a lot of people who might be listening might be thinking, boy, I want to be a change maker, but I'm not in a position of influence, or I'm not in a leadership position, or I'm just stuck here where I am. What's a step they can take?
Well, I think a lot more people are leaders than we realize, because I do think what you just hinted at, I think the simple definition of leadership is influence. And you probably do. You influence your kids, you influence your neighbors, you influence people, where you work. So don't downplay that. But again, if we go back to kind of the 5 practices, I think the first practice is what I call multiplication thinking, and you have to have this big dream. I think the big dream for your life really does. It pushes you outside yourself on a consistent basis. I'll share a second one. I think the second one is what I call permission giving. And permission giving is when, and maybe think about your business, Chris. There's somebody that's in your business and you go, man, this person's a rock star. And you know what? They're going to help us over this next season, but they probably even have so much potential. They ought to be doing their own thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so and with each of the practices we have, so the practice is permission giving. In the book, we also give a tool. And the tool that we give them, I like to give people really simple tools you can implement like that day. Like so like you literally can walk out this door and do this. And we call this the 4 most important letters of the leader's alphabet. I.C.N.U. And so you have what we call an I.C.N.U conversation, where you intentionally go, listen, and this person, maybe they're 10 years younger than you. And you're going, you know what? I've seen what you've done. I'm telling you, dude, you are an entrepreneur. You stick around here for the next 4 years. I will teach you everything I can. And you start figuring out what you want to do. But I'm telling you, you got a business inside you and you will crush it. And I want to do everything I can to make you successful. So that's permission giving. And I think it's, and again, it's kind of counterintuitive, because you're going, no, they didn't leave my company. Guess what? He's going to leave your company anyway. Okay. And so why not do everything you can to make, like your kids, you're going to do everything you can to make them successful. Because guess what? Then they're going to turn around too. And guess what? They will probably, if you make them successful, every time he runs into somebody who needs marketing, he's going to be driving them to you guys, right? And it's kind of legacy building. So I think that second one, of permission giving, and using that tool, that really simple tool of permission giving, which is having what I call I.C.N.U conversations. I'm going to put you on the spot. I know you're interviewing me, but I'm going to interview you for a second. Okay?
Oh boy.
I want you to think back. Is there anybody in your life that comes to mind who had that I.C.N.U conversation, that actually kind of, maybe they saw something in you didn't see in yourself. They gave you permission to do something that maybe you wouldn't have had the courage to do on your own. Is there anybody that comes to mind?
The first person is my dad, but I can think of dozens of people off the top of my head.
Okay. Is there
different seasons of life.
Is there a particular story that when you said my dad, was there something in particular thinking that he said to you, or was a moment?
there's many
or
moments.
a way of
It's-
being.
Yeah, definitely a way of being. It's many moments, everything from playing sports in the basement and talking about, hey, this could be something that you like. I see that you're great at this, or I see this in you, like in that terminology. All kinds of stuff.
Yeah. I think if your listeners will play that back, they'll go like, you know what, hold it. Some of the most significant influences in my life, I never labeled it that way before, but they really were. They were hero makers.
Mm-hmm.
And they had these I.C.N.U conversations with me.
Yeah. Yeah. I can think through multiple conversations with some of the most influential people in my lives where there was a moment where they said almost those exact words, I see this in you.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I've just thought they're great encouragers, like amazing encouragers, which they were and are. But now it's like, oh, they're hero makers. That kind of helps me reframe to.
And I think the other thing I would encourage your listeners too is be intentional about it. This, and don't be flippant about it. So don't say it if it's not true. But what if we go like, no, I'm not going to let a day or at least a week pass that I'm not going to have an intentional I.C.N.U conversation with somebody, because that is so, and in the position you're in, and as it continues to grow, it's kind of weird. As your influence grows, you have like a disproportional kind of influence on other people. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like you're going like, oh, you've written a bunch of books.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of weird. When you write a book, it's kind of like all of a sudden you don't really deserve it, but you get more influence. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Then probably you should. Mm-hmm. And then if you've written several, then, and if someone has an I.C.N.U conversation, it's weightier. Mm-hmm. And so I would encourage, as your influence grows, as your leadership grows, use that collateral in these I.C.N.U conversations, because it'll impact people and be really meaningful to them.
All right. So I know we could go down this route. Now I really want to. You've talked through the first two, the multiplication. You've talked through the permission. What follows that?
Well, I'll kind of be brief because I know we're getting close to time. So step number 3 is what we call disciple multiplying. Or I also could call it apprentice multiplying. And essentially, so if the first one is you got this big dream, realize I can't do it by myself, multiplication thinking. Secondly is permission giving. You're having these I.C.N.U conversations. Let's say you have it with one of your employees. Then the apprentice multiplying part is you literally bring them alongside you. And you go, and we actually in the book, we have a simple tool. We have what we call the 5 steps of apprenticeship. And it's a real simple process. And again, I'll point to Jesus. In the same book that we referenced before, John chapter 3, verse 22, Jesus, there's this phrase that says he spent some time with them. That 12, that started a movement.
Yeah.
Okay. He spent some time with them. And it actually comes from a Greek word, which is diatribo, which means to rub off. And basically just saying, yeah, Jesus just rubbed off on him. And so I would say, like, if you had that conversation with somebody in your company and you did see that in them, then you're going, okay, now I want to be intentional about apprenticing them over the next however long you decide. So, for example, like you asked about Ted, who's the new lead pastor. We had an 18-month apprenticeship. There was an 18-month apprenticeship where I was the lead pastor. He was the lead pastor apprentice. And we literally went through those kind of same 5 steps. The 4th practice is what we call gift activation. And sometimes what happens is you develop this person in your company and you want them to be your right-hand man. You want them to, or your right-hand woman, your right-hand person forever, or even a co. At some point, if you really see it in them, you really have to fully activate their gifts. And in a lot of cases, that means letting them go and let them do whatever it is that God meant for them to do. And you not only do that, but you bless them. Does that make sense?
For sure.
And this is, I'm particularly passionate about this. This happens a lot in the church world where, oh, you could be my associate pastor, that kind of thing. And you're like, for the next 40 years, when inside that person, they could start their own church. They would start other churches, you know what I mean? There's so much more potential, but because they were afraid, okay, they didn't fully activate their gifts. Mm-hmm. And what you really see, again, with Jesus, and even in what's called the Great Commission, he says, all authority was given to me. And he says, now I give it to you. And he says, go. And he literally commissions them to go. And then the 5th one is what I call it, and this is kind of, I talk to a lot of church leaders, is kingdom building. Okay, kingdom building. Maybe you could reference it as legacy building. So instead of counting how many people are a part of my thing, it's how many people did I send out to do God's thing. Does that make sense? So in the church space, instead of the most important number, and you referenced, a community Christian church is a mega church.
Yeah.
Statistically, that's true. That I'm not as wowed by that.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing I take the most joy in is how many churches we helped start and how many leaders we've helped be successful doing their thing. And I think that's where you change the scorecard. And you need to change the scorecard because it goes all the way back to this big dream, right? The multiplication thinking you had. And so for a youth pastor, I'll stick in that lane of church. For a youth pastor, instead of counting, how many kids are coming to my student ministry, it might be, how many am I actually challenging to go out and do ministry, whether it's in the business world or in the not-for-profit or in the church world. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Part of this, as I think through it, and I wonder if people feel the same way, this moving from hero to hero maker is starting to make a lot of sense. On the flip side, now it's, especially in your role, thousands of people in your church community, thousands of pastors that are looking to you for guidance, potentially millions of people impacted. How do you choose how do you choose those 10 people that Bob Uford had on the card? How do you identify, here's where I should invest my time? Because everyone wants a piece of your time, I'm sure.
Yeah. I'm probably not quite as popular as you might think. Having said that, I'd say two things. One is, and I think I got this from Bob Goff, and he would talk about this. There's lots of visions out there, and only some are accessible. So I try to be very accessible. Like I got another book coming out this next year, and I think in the first chapter I put my phone number in there.
Wow!
If people resonate with like this kind of conversation, I want to do whatever I can that's possible to help them. So encourage many, and then invest in a few. And so the invest in a few. So for example, again, with this transition, it's a fairly new transition for me to just focus on Exponential. I am starting like my own 10 or 12 list. I had a conversation last week with a guy who told me, he said, my dream, because I asked him the same question like his, he said, my dream is before it's all said and done, I'd like to help plant 10,000 churches. I was like, really? And I like this guy. He's a funny guy, good guy. And he said, yeah, 10,000. And he began to explain how he thought maybe he could do it. And I just told him, I said, anything I can do to help. So literally, he doesn't even know this unless he listens to this podcast. So I added his name to my list.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think you encourage many, but then you invest in a few.
Wow. That is so good. One of the things that I love is that this concept of hero to hero maker also is giving people the tools to build other hero makers, right? You've given people so many tools, not just in the Hero Maker book, but also in other books like Bless and just other things you've done. What I love about what you and John and others are doing is it's so practical. And really it takes really complex concepts into something that is simple that even somebody like me can actually do it. Like I can walk out of this room and have an I.C.N.U conversation.
Absolutely.
And it's like, oh, and I hope people listening really take that away the same way I will.
And one of the things we do, we really do try to drive it down to that, okay, how do you actually implement this in every day? And it's funny because sometimes they get so simple, people are like, oh, I.C.N.U, how cheesy can you be? Well, it turns out, that most people are, they're trying to stay married. They're trying to pay the bills. They're trying to, there's a lot of things they're trying to do. But if you can put the cookies on what do they call it, on the bottom shelf where they can get access to them, I think that's how you get a lot of traction. And I personally think it takes an extra layer of really thinking about some high level ideas to actually bring it down to going no, here's actually how you actually do it. So thank you for noticing that.
Yeah, this is so good. I want to finish this with 10 rapid fire questions.
10?
Where you just say the first thing that comes to mind. There's no wrong answer, but we'll compare it to John's. Who's the first person you think of when I say servant leadership?
First person came to mind was my mom.
John said the same thing. That's so funny.
Well, it must be true.
All right. Favorite author or book?
Favorite author or book? On the topic we've had today, there's a guy named Alan Hirsch who wrote a book called Forgotten Ways.
All right. 5 words that most describe you.
Futuristic, optimistic, results-oriented. I was a hyphen.
Yeah, that works.
Passionate, and White Sox fan.
I love 4 of them.
I know John didn't have that one.
Yeah, I'm a Tigers fan too. So,
well, we are no threat. We are no threat. We are so bad.
Not right now, at least.
No.
Favorite food?
Favorite food? Ooh, I do like a lot of. I had a great filet just this week.
All right. What's something you like to do in your free time?
I like to run.
All right. What's a surprising fact about you?
A surprising fact about me is that I drove an ice cream truck when I was in high school as a summer job.
That's awesome. Favorite place you've been?
Ooh, I'm going to name 2 places. I was just recently in Lake Como, Italy, which was phenomenal. And it's right up there with another place called Queenstown, New Zealand. Both beautiful lakes surrounded by mountains. Awesome.
Where's somewhere you want to go that you haven't been?
I've not been to China.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
The best advice. I just. You know Carey Nieuwhof?
Yeah.
So Carey has a podcast too, and I actually just got to interview him. He was in town, and this, I don't know if it's the best, but it's really good advice. And he said, because I asked him the same kind of question, and he said, work on your character more than your competency.
I literally was just talking about this with Steve Carter as well.
Okay.
That's some of his stuff. So I love that. And finally, why do you think a podcast on servant leadership is important?
Leaders are the people who change at the smallest level, families, companies, communities. On a bigger level, change the world, change the country. And if you can get leaders to have the mindset of being a servant, my term, hero maker, then you have the possibility for, all kinds of transformation for great, great good.
Wow. This has been so good. I'm so thankful that you came. I'm glad
My pleasure.
that
Thanks.
Our audience is going to get to hear from you. I know people are going to be trying to think through how did they not stay the hero in the story, but how did they become hero makers? And just so encouraging. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Servant Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to never miss an update. Be sure to check out the servantleadershippodcast.org for more updates and additional bonus content.